Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Foundation Software webinar. I hope everybody's doing well out there. My name is Patrick Smith. I'm going to be taking you all through an overview of Foundation today to show how our software can better serve your construction clients. I appreciate everybody's time today. I'm going to be about an hour, maybe a little bit less, in order to earn that CPE credit. So we're going to really get into the guts of Foundation today, show you some of the features that we've got available within the program. So it'll be you listen to me, I won't be able to hear you. So one-way audio here. If anybody does have any questions as we're going through the presentation, you can just fire them over into that little chat question area within the GoToWebinar control panel, and then we'll address those either during the presentation or afterwards. There are also going to be some polling questions that I'm going to release throughout the presentation, just so everybody's out there paying attention and keeping an eye on things. So keep an eye on those. There's going to be 3 of them throughout the presentation. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. What we'll do first is I'm going to give everybody a little info on Foundation software for those that aren't entirely familiar with us, a little PowerPoint presentation, and then we will get into the guts of Foundation and take a look at some of those features. So again, my name is Patrick. I've been here at Foundation for almost just over 22 years, and you'll see here a little info on our company. So really two sides to Foundation. So we've got Foundation software, which is the main area of Foundation. So it's accounting software designed for the construction industry. You can see here, founded in 1985. We've got about 6,500 clients nationwide. We only work construction. It's all we do. It's all we've ever done. You can see we cater to heavy payroll. We like prevailing wage, union, multi-state payroll. Now, the other side here is payroll for construction. So that is our payroll service. That is a true payroll service where we are processing payroll for our clients, cutting checks, processing direct deposits, paying the taxes, doing the filings, and so on. So for Payroll for Construction, that was founded at 2006. We've got about 1,500 clients, a little more these days. And you can see here we cater to small to mid-sized clients. We've got some large clients as well. Same thing as Foundation. We like the complex payroll, the prevailing wage, union, multi-state. And you can see the range here. Most clients doing between 2 and 50 million. Which again, you could say applies to Foundation as well. So same market that we're catering to. So typical Foundation clients, small to mid-size, union, prevailing wage. We like the trades. So we like the electricals, the civil, the mechanicals, so on and so on. General contractors, sure. The paper pushers of the world, construction management firms, not who we're chasing, but if you're doing construction, that's really what we cater to. But you can see out of our client base, it's about 80% trades and about 20% GCs. Most of those will have some type of labor, again, versus the paper pushing construction management firms. So 5 to 50 million is really our bread and butter on the Foundation side of things. With that in mind, no issues with the larger companies that are out there. You can see here our largest client did about 400 million last year. So it really doesn't matter. It's the 5 to 50 is our typical client base. Really anybody doing 3 to 75 is who we're marketing to, with a number of those larger clients in the mix as well. So Foundation, 1985 is when we started, 375. We're probably a little closer to 400 these days. About 6,500 clients nationwide, P4C, about 1,500. And one thing that we do like to point out here, we work directly with our clients. So no third party involved. We develop our software, we program it in-house, we sell, train, support, completely in-house here. Everybody's working under the same roof. So where we're going these days, our accounting software, it's solid. There's always things to add to it, of course, but from a demand standpoint, a lot of mobile needs out there for timekeeping, a lot of project management needs out there as well for tracking RFIs and submittals and so on. So we've always started with accounting. That's where our company originated. But over the past few years, we've been getting heavy into the mobile, the project management as well, just to provide some more offerings to our clients outside of just the straight accounting. Um, and relationships and partners, you can see we're very involved in the industry, CFMA and ABC, AICPA, CPAC is one as well that you don't see on here. So yeah, very involved with the various organizations in the construction world. All right, so with that in mind, let's pop out of here and we will jump into the foundation system. So I'm going to start with an overview of the menu, the navigation, just point out a few things that we've got to offer here, and then we'll get into some of the functionality. So base modules up on this top section, that's really our backbone. This is our core system, payables, receivables, the AIA billing, schedule of value, pay applications, those are built directly into accounts receivable. Ledger, of course, for financials, job costing, which is really the backbone of our program. Now, as a point of reference, for those of you, again, that don't have a ton of experience with us, because we're that mid-range, small to mid-range, you could say is our target, a lot of our clients come off of QuickBooks. So they need help with job costing in particular. They need help with the AIA billings. They need help with the complex payroll, like I'd mentioned earlier. Job costing, that's always the driver here. That is certainly our backbone. So that's really more or less who we're catering to are those that are on generic software like QuickBooks that don't have the construction functionality. And then, of course, those that are on legacy software, a lot of old programs floating around in our little corner of the industry. So we'll bring on a lot of clients from some of these dated systems as well. But really, QuickBooks users, those are the majority of companies that are coming our way. So we talked about payroll. Payroll can be done entirely in-house within the system for those that prefer not to outsource it. And then again, we've got payroll for construction, the payroll service side of things for those that want to outsource the payroll, have us take on, paying the employees and filing the taxes and doing the W-2s. So really a couple avenues, either in-house or by way of our payroll service, which is fully integrated with Foundation. And then we've got the purchase order subcontract module. So purchase orders can be issued through here. Subcontracts can be issued through here. It's all about the cost commitment to the job, allocating that commitment, and seeing what those outstanding balances are. Now, lastly, under base modules, we have the audit review. So the audit review is a module that we designed for that particular process. Anybody that has to go through audits, reviews, just makes it a little bit easier for the accountants and whatnot. So it's one of those things that, the audit process, instead of having to bounce around to different areas within the system, centralized area to get to the reports. I'll give everybody a peek here. So this is anything from an aging report, basic standard reports, to more complex reports like backlog and gain fade and the over-under billing WIP, job cash flow. So these reports exist all throughout the program. We just kind of threw them into one area here just to make it easy to find what you're looking for. All right, and before I go any further here, did have a question that came in. I'm going to answer some of these on the fly here. Does Foundation have to be installed on a Windows computer, or is there a cloud version or a Mac version, is the question. So the answer to that is we are a cloud system. Traditionally, way back when, we used to go local install. We really don't have any demand for that these days. So it's all hosted, it's cloud, it can be used on Windows environment, on a Mac environment. So really nothing has to be installed locally at a client site. This is all by way of the cloud where we host it. We do the backups each night. We install the updates. So again, with us doing everything in-house over here, it's something that we manage versus farm it out to an Amazon or some type of third party. And keep those questions coming. Again, some of those I'll answer on the fly. Some we may save for toward the tail end here. All right, now these additional modules here in this middle section, these are optional based on specific trades is how I like to frame it. So the civil contractors of the world, the excavating, the road contractors, pavers, a lot of those companies will use the equipment module. So that allows for expensing equipment to a job and tracking service and maintenance like oil changes and so on. And then we've got fixed assets, which is there for depreciation. Now these modules talk to one another. So if you set up a piece of equipment, it'll show up in fixed assets, and then you apply the respective depreciation schedule. We've got the inventory module as well for those that are tracking perpetual inventory. We have a service dispatch module for service-based contractors. that are creating work orders and these quick hitting, hour, 2 hour, 1 day or less type work order. The electricals, the plumbers, the mechanicals, the roofers, those that have a service division typically would use this dispatch module. And then to the right, we've got a couple specialty billing modules. We have what we call time and material, which is designed for long-term jobs that are billed on a T&M basis, hourly labor rates, material markups. So predefining those rates per customer, and then this system would automatically pick up any activity against that job, bill it out, do all the math behind the scenes based on those T&M rates. And then we've got unit price billing, which is pretty exclusive to heavy construction, those that are billing by the unit or by the quantity, as opposed to just a percentage of completion against that contract. Now, project control. These modules are on the operations side of things. Project management, this module we have more or less phased out. So traditionally, the RFIs and the submittals and all the document management had been done within the accounting software. Based on demand, everybody's wanting mobile project management, field management. So what we did a couple years ago is we developed a system that we call Project HQ. So this is a web-based platform that the project managers can use to track their documents and issue change orders and create RFIs. We'll get into this a little bit, time permitting, not much related to the accounting side of things, but this is what everybody's out looking for these days is just mobile project management without these PMs having to log into the accounting system to get to those documents. Now, we do have a scheduling module that creates a Gantt chart very similar to Microsoft Project. We also have document imaging, which is there for the electronic filing. So anything PDF copies typically can be drag and drop into our system, house those documents within the program. And then lastly here is what we call the executive dashboard. And I'm going to start here. This is going to give everybody a pretty general idea of what we can do in the way of reporting. And the concept behind this dashboard is the ability to start on a very summarized level, and then you can drill down into greater and greater detail. So a lot of times it's an owner of the company or a project manager or a controller that logs in here to see the status of the company. On the left side here, we've got totals for all of the active jobs, total contracts, and what's been billed against those contracts, estimated cost, actual cost, estimated versus actual gross profit, and then each job over here on the right are the jobs that account for the totals. This is all about drilling down. So if I want to see these jobs laid out in a report format, I can click this button, View Report, and that drills down into a little WIP schedule. So the WIP, the over-under billing, the bonding reports, this is our wheelhouse. This is absolutely our backbone. The WIP schedule here, pretty simple WIP. This is the one that's built into our dashboard. There's a number of different other work-in-progress reports throughout our system. Some a little bit more summarized like this one versus others that are a little bit more detailed. But in any event, we auto-generate the WIP without any kind of spreadsheets involved here. Now from the WIP schedule, there's a job that you want to look into further, click that job number, and the system will drill down into a summary of that job, the contract amount, what's been billed against it, estimated cost versus actual cost, gross margin, the original contract plus change orders, percentage of completion. You can see if I scroll down a bit, we're tracking open commitments for outstanding purchase orders and subcontract agreements. So you all get the idea. These are numbers for that one job that we clicked into. From here, anything that's blue, that means a user can continue to drill down. And this is where it's all about the transparency and the easy access to the data without having to run 5 different reports to get to more and more detail. If I click this link that says job cost detail, for example, it's going to take this estimated cost, $449,000, this actual cost, $197,000. You'll see here when I click job cost detail, here's the breakdown of that estimated cost versus actual cost into various cost codes. Now, cost codes, they are user-defined, they are unlimited. The general contractors of the world, a lot of times will use the standard CSI divisions, which we can load in. Specialty contractors of the world typically have more unique cost codes that cater to their particular trade. So in this example, this would be more for like a heavy construction civil contractor, whereas somebody like an electrical or a mechanical would have completely different codes than what you're seeing here. Then within the code, you can see the breakdown of labor for that code, material, subcontract, equipment, burden. These we call cost classes, and some codes may have multiple classes. Other codes may have one or two classes. It just depends on the nature of that particular code. Now, occasionally, we'll come across a client that needs even another level of detail, and that is what we call the phase. So the phase would go above the cost code, and some use it, others don't. Most just need the code and class level, but for those that do need a little bit more granularity, they can track the phase, then they can see the cost code within that phase, then or the cost codes within that phase, and then the cost classes within that particular code. And then ultimately, if a user wants to see transaction detail, they can click any of these classes, like this 4200 in labor as an example. If I click labor, that's going to show all of the transactions that fed directly in from the payroll module to account for that labor within that code, within that job, or again, potentially within that phase, within that job as well. Now, if I go back a screen and I go to material as another example, in the case of material, you can see a couple payable invoices that account for that material cost. If I click the transaction number, here is the detail of that payable. And then with our document imaging in mind, if a user clicks this little paperclip icon, now we're drilling down into the scanned image of that material invoice or that subcontract invoice or whatever type of transaction it is. So the point here is you just keep clicking and clicking, dig into this detail without having to, again, run multiple reports and pull a hard copy of the image. Okay, so it gives everybody a pretty general idea of what we're about in the way of job costing, the different levels. Again, the QuickBooks users that are out there, they struggle with this. Everything's done within spreadsheets. It's a double, triple entry. So this, realistically, the most attractive part of our program in the way of those job reports. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and fire out one of these polling questions. All right. Okay, so the poll is out there. The question is, what are the three levels of job costing in Foundation? I'll give everybody a minute to go ahead and answer that one, and then I'm going to close it out. So everybody, go ahead and check that box or pick that answer, and then we'll keep going here. All right, it looks like we're waiting on maybe one or two yet. All right, a couple more seconds. I'm going to close it out. Okay, very good. So that's the executive dashboard. In addition to the job cost piece of it, just so everybody's aware, we can manage change orders through here as well. Now, manage meaning not enter the change orders, just see the different statuses, and then drill down into a job, drill down into the different statuses within that job, drill down into the individual change orders that fit that particular status. So it's just another piece here within the dashboard. And you see these different tabs up on top: financials, cash activity, aging reports can be accessed through here as well for those that kind of want to see a graphical aging, versus running the standard aging report within the payable and receivable modules. So from an access standpoint, a lot of times, the owner of the company sees everything. Anybody with admin access, the controller, the office manager, the CFO, they see everything. Whereas project managers, a lot of times can see job costs and change orders, but they can't get to the financial data or any of that other, cash activity. So in here, it depends on who needs to access the numbers, and then security can be set based on what they're able to see and what they're not supposed to see. All right. So in addition to that, a couple other reports here. You notice here, if we go into the job cost reports menu, we've got a number of standard general reports, and then we have what we call activity reports. And these are all preloaded within the system. So these are in addition to the dashboard. And some of these reports clients use heavily. There may be some reports that don't apply to a certain client. We can just get them out of the list here. For those that have their go-to reports that they want to save as a favorite, they can just drag and drop and shortcut to that particular report. Now, when reports are run, they can be sorted and filtered based on the job number, the geographic area, the project manager. So we see a lot of clients, for analytic purposes, let's run reports, based on different cities or counties and see maybe we're more profitable here versus there. So when the job is set up, all that information can be tied to that particular job and then sorted and filtered based on these reports. Now, a couple that typically interest the CPAs of the world. One is our WIP. So we saw the simple version of that WIP report within the dashboard. The standard WIP you see here is a little bit more detailed. And what I like about the standard WIP is it would show the total over and under billings down here in the corner. And then you'll see if we go to the next page of this report, it'll show the journal entry, and a user can just click this post icon up on top here. It'll automatically hit the financials without having to back out of the report, manually key that number in, just automatically hits the financials as often as the user wants. So that is one that is always of interest during these overviews here, these CPA webinars. Another one is overhead allocation, and this is one that we always encourage clients to use. A lot of the companies that we bring on board are just not allocating their overhead whatsoever. So this is a tool that can automate the process. Now, for those that do want to keep it simple on the overhead allocation, we do have methods to just apply a percentage of labor or an hourly rate. So some really like to take a guesstimate. All right, let's just take 30% of our labor, allocate it as an overhead, leave it at that. Very doable within the system. This method would be, call it a little bit more accurate. So the way this all works is those accounts on the ledger that are flagged as overhead, it would know any expenses going through those overhead accounts will gather up here. So in this case, you can see I've got $25,000 in overhead expense. I'm running this for 1 month. So I've got that $25,000 in overhead expense. The system would then know how to distribute that $25,000 to the various jobs based on a couple different methods. Could be based on distribution of direct expense. So this Delaware Courts job accounts for 11% of my overall direct expense. It's going to get hit with 11% of that $25,000 overhead expense, which would automatically allocate and show on the job reports. So it could be based on direct expense in total, could also be based on revenue. Maybe that job accounts for 11% of my revenue, it'll get hit with 11% of the overhead, or you can get even more detailed. For those that are very labor intensive, they'll have the driver as the labor expense. So Delaware Courts is 11% of my labor, it gets hit with 11% of the overhead. Whereas the GCs of the world, they'll base it more on subcontract expense as opposed to labor expense. So we help each client set it up based on their needs, cater to the type of company that they are. One way or the other, those numbers are always going to hit that job in real time, as long as it's set up properly and the client works with us to go through that configuration. So the WIP, auto-generated. The overhead allocation, automatically processed. The financial statements, the balance sheet, the P&L. We do have standard financials built into the program. Here's an example of my balance sheet. Again, pretty simple. So for those that aren't really picky or finicky about the financials, they'll just roll with our financial statements here that are preloaded. Same thing with job reports, whereas those that are maybe a little bit picky on the way that the financials are laid out, in the very bottom left here, we have what we call the genies, and these are all unique little features to Foundation. One being what we call the data genie, which is our built-in report writer. It's a very easy drag and drop interface for those that do want to have a little bit more customization on the financial statements. And I'll give you an example here. If I go into my reports under General Ledger, again, the balance sheet, the P&L, the cash flow statement, you can see I can get to these through the standard menu, or I've got them set up as shortcuts as well. The data genie reports, these would be more of the custom reports that are built into the system, or that can be built in by way of each user. So I've got a number of examples here. I like this income statement, pretty simple. I've got a current month and a prior month, easy enough to add 2 months ago, 3 months, 4 months, this year, last year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So the point here is customizable financial statements for those that are a little bit more, I want them to look a certain way versus adapting to the ones that are already preloaded. All right. So far we've covered the menu, we've gone through the dashboard, we've gone through some job costing, we've gone through the change order reporting, the WIP, the financials, the overhead allocation. So that should give everybody a pretty good idea of what we can provide from an output standpoint and eliminate spreadsheets for those that are manual reporting. So what I'm going to do here is get into some of the day-to-day entry. So we'll kind of back up a little bit here, set up a job, and then go through some of those entries so everybody can see how those numbers are getting to the respective reports. Now, for anybody that hasn't picked up on this yet, the modules that you're seeing in bold, 3 sub-menus, daily is for day-to-day entry, maintenance is where a user would go for setup, like a vendor or a job or an employee. Each module you can see has its own reports menu. So if we were to set up a job, for example, we'll go to maintenance under job costing, we'll go to jobs. This is where you can create a brand new job, or I'm just going to pull up an existing job. So I've got my sample job here, and I do use numbers throughout my system for jobs and employees and cost codes and so on. It's alphanumeric. Have to use numbers for the chart of accounts, but everything else, letters, numbers, dots, dashes, no problem. Description, name the job whatever you want to name it. Underneath that, attach the customer, assign the project manager, define that geographical area, and these are just my examples. Users can customize these as needed. Project class is a way to set up different job types. So I've got very generic examples here. These are all customizable. And like we saw when I mentioned on the reporting, sort and filter based on those criteria versus having to run a report for all the jobs and then dig into which jobs fit which criteria. Certified payroll. So going back to the complexities of payroll, we like the prevailing wage, we like the certified payroll needs. So if a job is a certified prevailing wage job, the user would just check this box and the system would auto-generate that report. The checkbox also is retroactive. A lot of folks don't know that job is certified or nobody tells them until it's in progress. Come back to the job, check this box, it would go backwards and reproduce all the reports that user missed. Now to the right of all that, we've got the contract amount, we've got the cost estimate, and then there's a field for retainage. Also a struggle for the QuickBooks users that are out there. No way to track retainage. In our case, automated process. And I'll show you here if I shortcut to my aging. If you were to run an age receivable in Foundation, a user would see 30, 60, 90, and then a separate column for retainage. So there's no double entry. It doesn't have to be entered as a separate invoice. It just hangs on to it, and it shows up in its own column, rather than it being shown as a current due balance and goofing up the aging. So true retention, no double entry, no workarounds. Now going back to the job setup here, for any union contractors, we do cater to that as well. So in a nutshell, on the employee record, indicate where that employee, their home union, what's their home union jurisdiction. On the job record, indicate that job jurisdiction, and then the system would know what to do. So some of our clients, a lot of our clients are non-union. Those that are union, some are single union. They don't have to worry about any of this. Others are multi-union, maybe multi-state as well. So on the employee, where do they live and what's their home union? On the job record, where's that job located? What's the job union? The system would then know what to do. Even getting into reciprocity between unions, maybe an employee that's home union is local 6, but they work a job that's local 94, there might be reciprocity where fringes stay with the job union and deductions come back home, or vice versa. Any of those complexities we cater to as well. So again, pretty evident. We like those complex payrolls versus the cookie cutter, standard payroll, which is fine. You can run any kind of payroll through our system, but this is really, kind of gives you an idea of what we do cater to. So with that in mind, the job is set up. and now a user can make entries against that job. Payroll as an example, if I pop into the payroll module, time cards could be entered directly into Foundation, or they can be fed in from the mobile app. So if I pop in here and enter a time card for Rick Stevens as an example, I can code Rick's time to the job, to a cost code, and if it's an easy one, if that guy's on that same job doing demo 8 hours a day the entire week, we can plug those hours in, press enter, everything else defaults, and then the user doesn't have to go through all those keystrokes. Now with the prevailing wage and union in mind, you notice here it pulled in $36.50. Maybe that employee is working as an electrician on that prevailing wage job or within that union. But if they bump up to a foreman, for example, now it's going to know to pay them that higher rate. So we work with our clients to build all of those prevailing wage rates into our system, or the union setup with the fringes and deductions. And then from an entry standpoint, nothing has to be done manually here. Now that's if a user were to enter directly into Foundation. If any of your clients out there need mobile timekeeping, then it's done by way of the field. Phones, tablets, laptops is fine. So users can clock in and clock out. Users can enter what we call single time card, which is just a way to enter the time straight onto the phone or the tablet. This could be each employee, or this could be a supervisor foreman entering for a crew. We also have what we call the grid time card. The grid time card is normally what we see by way of those supervisors and foremen that have the ability to define a crew, define whatever cost codes apply to that particular day, and then particularly handy if these employees are bouncing code to code, very easy to break all this down on one entry instead of having to go employee by employee, cost code by cost code. So the point here is number of ways to get the time into the system, and then from that point, either process that payroll in-house by way of printing checks and direct deposits, or if you were to use or if a client of yours were to use our payroll service, then it feeds everything over. We process it. Now, regardless of that, would still have full access to all these reports. Even if our payroll service is processing payroll, the client would still be able to run earnings reports and quarterlies and W-2s, certified payroll as well. This is one that is super automated, whether it is printed out of the system onto a blank sheet of paper or uploaded to services like LCP Tracker and any of these services that are popping up for those that need to submit electronically. But we do cater to not only federal forms here, but any state that has their own. These are all built into the system for any companies that are, working in certain states that have their own unique particular formats. Okay, so one last thing to point out in payroll, and I'm going to jump back to my dashboard here. You all may have noticed, in addition to the labor allocating, we also allocate the burden. So it's that raw labor and all the burden that goes along with it, taking into account workers' comp and unemployment and any of those payroll tax burdens. Those will allocate by way of following the labor to the job and to that cost code. Okay, so for those that are issuing purchase orders, or for those that are subbing work out, those can be issued directly through the system as well. Could be a purchase order for a material purchase, or it could be contracted labor. One way or the other, it's going to create the cost commitment to that particular job and that cost code. So whether it's a purchase order or a subcontract, it's always committing that cost, and then the commitment would be reduced as the invoice is entered into accounts payable against this contract. So we'll track workers' comp, certificates of insurance, workers' comp certificates against that contractor, making sure nothing's slipping through the cracks against that sub. So provided all those certificates are up to date, then the cost commitment is created against that job. And a point of reference here, our system allows for embedding the contract or the purchase order into the program itself. It's customizable. Users can use their own terminology, company logos, and so on. So rather than having to maintain these in Word or Excel, these contracts can be embedded in the system, and then it would just know, where to place that vendor name and where to place that job name and the value of the contract. So templates can be designed here, or users can just use our template or tweak ours. Either way, these can be generated straight out of here without going through Word or Excel. All right, so the invoice or the contract or the purchase order is issued. the vendor sends a bill to the client, and that client would then enter that invoice and apply it to that contract or that purchase order. So in this case, here's Lewis Construction, the invoice number, the date, and they're billing us off of contract 122. We select that contract, everything feeds in without the user having to re-enter all that data, like the job and the cost code. Now, if, let's say, the sub or the supplier overbills us and we try to enter that in excess of the contract value, it's going to yell at us, you can't do this, you got to figure out what's going on here, put a change order in for that $1,000 in order for the system to let that entry go through. Or the flip side to that is, let's say out of that $65,000, they get a bill for $35,000. Now we would show $35,000 in cost against that job and that cost code, and that remaining committed cost would be outstanding on those job reports to show, hey, there's still $30,000 committed to that job by way of that outstanding balance on that PO or that subcontract. All right, and from here, a user would be able to drag and drop a copy of that payable invoice. This is through our document imaging. And you can see here, I've got my screens overlapping. I can only show one monitor for this presentation here. A lot of clients have dual monitors. Get the image on one monitor, the entry on the other, just so you don't have to toggle back and forth. They would just drag and drop that respective image, and then they could either leave it as is and drill down from the reports like we saw earlier, or have the ability to route this for approval before it hits those job reports. So if AP wants to route this to a project manager, for example, that project manager can approve the invoice electronically, so it's out there pending. They would approve that invoice within our document imaging module. So I'm a PM, I log in here, I can see all my pending invoices that are waiting to be addressed, approved. I can approve, I can reject, revise. So it's a formal way to go through this process without having to trade paper back and forth. All right, so we've reviewed the purchase orders and the subcontracts to get the commitments into the system. We've applied the invoices against them. We've routed those invoices for approval, and now they've hit the books. Going to go ahead and launch another polling question. And you all should have access to it. Which type of costs do open purchase orders and subcontracts represent? So go ahead and get that answer in. Again, we'll give it a minute, and everybody will see the poll close here in about another 60 seconds or so. All right, I'm going to give it a few more minutes or a few more seconds here. We'll see if those answers trickle in. All right, good to go here. Okay, so just to kind of recap what we've covered so far, we looked at the dashboard, we looked at a lot of the reporting, the WIP, and the overhead allocation and whatnot. We've backtracked to setting up a job. We've got our payroll entered against that job, which is accounting for the labor and the burden expenses. We've got the purchase orders and the subcontracts issued to get our commitments in. Those invoices are entered against the committed costs to reduce the commitments, reduce those balances. Now let's say that the user is ready to bill that job. In accounts receivable, the AIA, this is the go-to reporting option, their go-to reporting method. So in this example, everything that we're seeing on this general tab, this info goes to the front page of the AIA, the G702 page. And then on the billing tab, that's where you're able to see the schedule of value breakdown to see the line items against that entire contract value. Now, if you notice here, I'm on application number 1, so I haven't billed for this job yet. When a user is ready to bill, they can bill by the dollar amount, and it calculates the percentage, or bill by the percentage and let it back into those dollars. Any combination's fine. Retainage, we saw that percentage right on that job record. If I click default retainage, it's going to pick up that percentage, pull those numbers in line by line without the user having to manually calculate anything. Now, we've run into scenarios, or we always run into scenarios where that retainage might reduce halfway through the job. Then you get back into that job, you change it from 10 to 5 or 10 to 0, whatever it is. Then the system would know what to do moving forward to handle that adjustment. So once the numbers are in, let's say we're going to build this 92,000. We'll go ahead and save it and then print it. And this would go right onto a blank piece of paper. So the front page of the billing, G702, and then the continuation, 703. So anybody that wants to print this physically, they can print it. Anybody that wants to PDF it, send it electronically, that's doable as well. You can see up on top here, PDF, Word, Excel, CSV. We've got all these standard import or exports that are built into the system. So anybody that wants an electronic, kick it out to PDF, do what you need to do from that point. So the form itself, nice that you can get it out of the program. The other really neat thing here is this can be posted directly from this screen without a user having to enter a separate invoice into accounts receivable. So, a lot of the QuickBooks users, for example, they're creating the AIA in Excel, then entering an invoice into receivables to get the billing on the books, then putting another invoice in for the retainage. This would eliminate those multiple steps. So it gets posted through here. One invoice has been created and posted. It is now on the aging. So that invoice is out there. On the aging report, you can see the amount here for 92,000. The 9,200 of that would be held in that retainage column. Now, in addition to creating the invoice on the aging, also updates your GL and updates that job revenue. So if a user were to run a financial statement, run a job report, run the executive dashboard that we saw at the very beginning, those numbers would show immediately in real time without having to go to 2, 3, 4 different places to get those numbers across the board. And then you'll see here, if I pull that same job back up, we are now in application 2. Those completed this period numbers automatically feed over to previous application, and now the user can move on with the next pay application without having to shift those numbers over. So it'll automatically roll it forward. And if a user ever runs into, we see this all the time as well, app 1 is rejected, and they didn't like that 34,000 for site work. So we have this function that we call roll back. So when you roll it back, it'll ask the user, are you sure you want to roll this back to application 1? We say, yep, let's go ahead and do it. Now, from a posting standpoint, our system is date sensitive. We're a soft close where a user can prevent somebody from entering or posting into last month or last year, next month, next year, but it's not a hard close process, system driven. So the administrator has the rights to dictate, okay, you can enter this adjustment into last month. If it's, maybe right into the a couple days into the new month, you could post back to last month to make this adjustment, or if we're 3 weeks into the new month or new accounting period, then restrict entry to do that. So it's flexible, it's admin driven versus the system telling you have to post it to this day or this month. So just to kind of throw that out there, that's why he's asking me the rollback date. So what happens here is it reverses that invoice, it takes it off the aging, it reverses the debits and credits, it also removes that revenue from the job. So there's nothing else that needs to be done at this point. We are back to square one. You'll see here, back to app 1, that previous application, all those numbers shift right back over to completed, and now change what needs to be changed, resubmit. Now from an audit standpoint, on the audit reports, you'd be able to see that original 92,000, the negative 92,000 reversal, and the new amount of 89 in this case. On the aging report, however, that remains clean. All you see on the aging is the new amount of 89,000 versus seeing a bunch of negative credits on the aging and having to offset against that original. So true reversal process without having to put a credit in against that original invoice. All right, so with that in mind, standard invoices, those can also be entered outside of the AIA. So anybody that just needs to do a basic invoice, basic billing to a customer, they can select the customer, they can pick the job, they can pick whichever template they want to use. These are pulling from the Form Genie, and then they would just throw a date in, type in an amount, throw in a percentage of completion. So this would be a little bit more on the custom invoice side of things versus the standard AIA. And just to give everybody a look at how that would work, we would take clients into the form Genie. This is all dragging and dropping, super, super easy. So if I pull up one of my templates, for example, where do I want to place my company logo? Where do I want to put my company name? Fonts, colors, bold, italics, like you see in Word or Excel. This is just built in. You don't have to do any of this through Word or Excel. It's all embedded within Foundation. So the standard billings, the purchase orders, the change orders, those can all be customized in addition to the templates that we provide initially. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point, we've got about 4, 5, 6 minutes before we're going to wrap things up here. I'm going to give everybody a peek at Project HQ. And this is really just kind of an FYI so you know it's out there. You know, again, it's more for the PMs of the world, more on the operations side of things, you know, not so much accounting transaction related, but just because there's such a demand for this, it's good to know that this stuff is out there. So everybody probably knows the name Procore. You know, we're not Procore. This isn't to the level of a Procore, but it's that same general concept with field project management. The advantage here is this is tied directly into the accounting software behind the scenes, meaning if I set up a job in Foundation, it'll show up here. If I create a change order here, it'll show up in Foundation. So behind the scenes, the back-end accounting and the project management, they're talking with one another. So if a user wants to manage documents within a job, for example, you know, I say I'm a project manager. I log in here. I can see a little snapshot of how many jobs I'm managing and how many documents I have overdue, you know, maybe RFIs and change orders and so on. Now, if I tap into one of these job numbers, and this could be on a phone, a tablet, a laptop, so a user taps into one of their job numbers, they would be able to see, all right, here's all my log entries, and I'll get to a date where I've got some better data here, so bear with me. So I log in, it defaults to today. I can see, are there delays on that job? Was there labor performed that day? Notes, photos, visitor logs, weather can automatically be captured where they can just set different increments, you know, maybe 8 o'clock, noon, and 4 o'clock, and it would populate the weather conditions based on the location of that job, you know, versus somebody having to key that stuff in manually. So all of the daily logs can be managed through here. The schedule can be managed as well. So project managers have the ability to assign tasks and assign different employees to those tasks. It would notify the employee, hey, Donald, you're going to do clearing on that job today. Sends Donald a text message. Donald knows where to go and what to do. Now, in addition to tracking the logs and tracking the schedule for that particular job and managing manpower and whatnot, users also have the ability to manage their documents. In this case, RFIs. I've got 5 of them for this job. Submittals, I've got 3 of them for this job. If I tap into my RFI count, it's going to show me the description of each one of those RFIs. Who are they sent to? What do they do? What's the status? Tap into an individual RFI, and then it's going to show, okay, why does this RFI exist? What's the question? Is this going to impact the cost or the schedule for this job? Who is it sent from and who is it sent to? Any type of attachments. We've got integration with Dropbox and Microsoft OneDrive and Google Drive. We also have email tracking within this as well. So emails can be launched by way of Project HQ. They'd be logged in here, centralized against those particular documents, just so a user doesn't have to get into their email sent items, for example, to see, you know, which emails relate to this RFI or this change order. It's all centralized and built in. And that does include change orders and the commitments as well for the POs and the subcontracts. So requests for change order can be issued. They can be converted to a change order. That would then feed into Foundation, update the contract value, update the percent complete, update the WIP, and then update the GL as a result, taking into account that automated journal entry. So again, I mentioned commitments, the POs, the subcontracts, those can be issued through here or entered right into Foundation. Same thing with the change orders. For those that don't use this, you know, you could still throw a change order, a purchase order, a subcontract right into the accounting system. So some use this, others just need the accounting. It's just case by case. And lastly here, collaboration. This is a way to easily see downloaded and uploaded files. and track the overall mailbox for that particular job rather than just seeing the emails related to that single RFI like we saw before. All right, so again, not going to get in really to the guts of this thing. This is, just kind of showing this as, hey, just know it's out there for any of your clients that are heavy into the project management side of things. But like I said, huge demand for this these days, huge demand for the mobile app, and then the back-end accounting. So all three of those components, they're all talking with one another behind the scenes. All right. Lastly here, I'm going to throw out one of the final polling questions, and this is going back to the billing. So we talked about the schedule value and whatnot. So I kind of skipped over that polling question, but I'm going to fire it in here anyway. And you're all going to see which standard format is used for percent complete billing. So go ahead and answer that one. And once we get those, we'll see if there's any kind of questions out there, and then I'll let you all get back to your day. All right, good to go. We got them all in here. Okay, so what we do at this point, looks like we are pretty good on questions. I don't see any extras that came in, so I think we're okay there. So what we'll do is we've got a list of everybody that sat in today. So we'll go ahead and process this webinar, and you guys will all get that CPE credit. So there's an email that's going to go out, and we've got a CPA liaison over here, Chris Masteller, that handles all this stuff. So she'll get all that together. She'll get the information together that you need for the CPE credit. For anybody out there that has questions, you can absolutely get in touch at your convenience. So my name is Patrick, last name is Smith. I'm easy to find over here. If you call in and you have any questions for me, feel free, not to worry at all. I'm happy to help. So with that in mind, I'm going to let you all go here. I appreciate everybody's time. Hope it helped. Hope you learned a little bit about us. If you have any questions, like I said, just let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that. And everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.